Saludos, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being on our program today. I'm Armando F. Sanchez, and I'm looking forward to this wonderful program. We're here to highlight 50 years anniversary of Chicana and Chicano studies, 1969 to the present 2019. I'm very, very honored to have Dr. Alvaro Huerta. He's an associate professor, California State Polytechnic University, Pomona. There's just two of them. So thank you for being on our program with us today, Doctor.
Gracias, Armando.
50 years. That's a long time. I was 17 years old, 1969. First semester, Claremont Colleges, Claremont Men's, starting to backtrack and think about it and sort of analyze and not so much reminisce, but also to analyze and see where we are today and where we are in the future. So your views on that?
Well, it's an incredible period. Too often, unfortunately, the young people today are oblivious to the fact that it's been 50 years. And one of the reasons is because ethnic studies is not taught in the high schools. It's taught in some colleges, but in K to 12, where most people get their education, of course, it's not something that's taught. But for those of us who have studied Chicano studies, who have been part of the Chicano movement as students, as activists, and then later as organizers and academics like myself, it's a major milestone. Unfortunately, like I said, most of our people are unaware of what has been accomplished. When it comes to Chicano civil rights, everybody knows Cesar Chavez, and a few people, or a lot of people know Dolores Huerta, not as famous as Cesar Chavez, but she's up there in terms of her lifelong journey of fighting for not just farm workers, but for Chicanos and Chicanas in education and in other fields. But unfortunately, less people know about the walkouts that happened in the late 60s, the Chicano moratorium in 1970, and other struggles that Chicanos and Chicanas have been fighting for the last 50 years. And it's very important. And I think this is the best time for us to relive it and to revive it, given the attacks on people of Mexican descent by Trump and his administration.
Now, the idea, let me make it a little bit on a personal level.
Sure.
Okay, let me take you back to 1969, 68, sort of that period. What stands out in your mind from that period of time, whether it be on a personal or a historic level?
Okay. Well, I entered UCLA in 1985. I was 17 years old. I was a math major. And then later I changed to history. So I started taking classes with Dr. Juan Gomez Quiñones. And actually, I'm going to write an op-ed with him today on issues of the moratorium and the 50 years. So for me, for the first time in my life, as a 17-year-old kid from East LA, I started to get assignments that had to do with Chicanos and Chicanas during that time period. We're talking 1969 and even a little earlier. So for me, it was a little bit of a revelation, and I was a little bit disturbed, and even to the present, that I didn't know anything about people like Sal Castro. I didn't know anything about Corky Gonzalez, Reyes Lopez Tijerina, and I know there was a lot of Chicanas that were not as famous, due to the machismo and then the sexism in this country in terms of ignoring the struggles and victories of Chicanas in this country, apart from Dolores Huerta, but there's many, many more. So for me, it's been a little bit of a tragedy on a personal level of not knowing that, of being deprived that history. I wish I would have known it through K to 12. It would have given me a little bit more pride in my ethnic roots. But by the time I started to learn it, it was more like it was kind of like a born again Christian. It's like a revelation. Like you're kind of revived, and all of a sudden now you see the world in a different way. So for me, it was more of like an awakening once I learned about what was happening in the late 60s by young, beautiful, and strong Chicanos and Chicanas and throughout the Southwest, fighting for our rights. You know, we know a tremendous amount about the civil rights movement led by African Americans like Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King, but we know very, very little about Chicanos and Chicanas. So for me, reflecting on the 50 years, it actually takes me back to 1985, 1986, 87, when I was in Mecha at UCLA, and studying these authors like Juan Gomez Quiñones, Rudy Acuña, and others on our history. And for the first time, learning that we do have a history and that we do matter and that our people also struggle. We're not asking or begging for crumbs or like, please let us, please accept us. It was more like, you know, this is our human right. You know, we deserve to be appreciated and we can't be ignored, and we're not second-class citizens. So for me, a lot of that reflection has to do with a continuation of struggles throughout the last 50 years. And now we see it more like with the dreamers and young people, you know, fighting for recognition and to become citizens in this country due to their lack of legal status. So I see that as well as part of the Chicano movement. So for me, it has to do with that, with reflecting on something that was taken away from us. And then once those of us that had the privilege, because you and I and others are a minority in terms of people coming from the Latina community that had the opportunity to go to the university. So for those of us that have that privilege and have the opportunity to study that, I think it makes a big difference in our lives.
Sounds also like we have a responsibility also to continue making sure that the rights and the privileges that we merit as human beings are not taken away because of somebody's philosophy.
Yes, definitely. I think that's an excellent point. There's a lot of people, like when I talk to my students, they're not my students, they don't belong to me, but when the students that I teach, a lot of them are struggling. A lot of them are Latinas and Latinos. They're not all Mexican origin, they're Central American, others, but they're struggling. And what I tell them, I know all of you are struggling because they have to work and they're paying tuition and they're incurring debt. But what I tell them is that even though you're struggling, you're privileged compared to the majority of Latinas and Latinos in this country. You're privileged compared to the farm workers or people like your parents that didn't have an opportunity to go to college. So you have to use that privilege for the public good. You have to use that privilege to help others. First of all, help yourself, graduate, you know, become a lawyer, doctor, an educator. But as you're doing that, you know, don't forget that you have that privilege. And given that you have that privilege, that also comes with responsibilities, and that it's in your best interest that you pay it forward, and whether it's within your own family, siblings, or cousins, or people in your community, so that you're not the only one. You're not the only Latina who's an engineer student at Cal Poly Pomona, but that you open the door for others. And if you're a citizen like I am, I was born in this country. I have 8 brothers and sisters, and half of us were born here and half in Mexico. I don't see myself as special or like I'm better than them. But because I was born here, I have that privilege that I can speak out against a lot of these anti-immigrant sentiments, and I have the freedom of speech, and nothing is going to happen to me. I'm not going to get deported. I might get deported to East LA, you know, where I grew up, you know, but because
there's a few places to eat out there still.
Yeah.
I like to go to.
King Taco and Tepayet.
No, tampoco.
But having that privilege of citizenship allows me to speak up, and I know that if somebody who doesn't have citizenship does the same thing, he or she may get deported, right? So I think that's what, for me, these type of privileges that I have at different levels allow me to speak up without any fear, because I know that there's millions of others that look like me that don't have that same opportunity.
You remind me of that statement, you know, we have a responsibility to speak those who cannot have a voice up for themselves. So I'm hearing that again, and I think it's a wonderful point of view. Mm-hmm. I want to stop you for a second and highlight that you're just about ready to release a new book, Defending Latino, Latina Immigrant Communities. xenophobic era of Trump and beyond. So tell us a little bit about that book. And this is all part of the movimiento, the fact that you're in college, you graduate, Ph.D. Berkeley, and you're writing on this topic. So tell us a little bit about the book and how it fits. It's all part of the 50-year anniversary.
Oh, definitely. I see myself as an integral part of the 50-year anniversary. My trajectory started in 1985. So I think I have about 34 years in the movement. And for me, whatever education that I have obtained, bachelor's and master's from UCLA, PhD from Berkeley, I've been able to learn how to conduct research and how to become a public policy analyst, and use those skills for the benefit of our own people. So I highlight criticism against not just Trump, but also Obama, who deported 2.7 million immigrants, and other presidents who claim to be on behalf of working people, like Clinton, but a lot of their policies, like the Welfare Reform Act, for example, pretty much devastated millions of poor people in this country, my family included, which at one point depended on public aid by the government. So for me, I'm able in this book to integrate the research aspect of it, but also looking at the personal in terms of my own experience as a son of immigrants, and highlighting the experiences of people like my parents, and using that opportunity to say, well, it's not just my parents, it's millions of others. For example, my father was a bracero, came with a guest worker program in the 1950s and 60s. And millions of Mexicans came to this country to provide agricultural labor and also help with the railroad tracks and other infrastructure. So I write about that as an example, and I highlight my own father's experience, and then I broaden it to, it's not just me, it's millions of others, that children and grandchildren that are still alive today, that their parents sacrificed their lives and their dreams so that we can have a better future. So it's a way of integrating, the political, the personal, and also for the last 5 years in this book, and then the other books that I have written is like 5 years before that, is to attack the policies on a consistent level that are against immigrants, against poor people, against working class people, against marginalized people like myself and where I come from.
Wonderful. The idea is in 1969. It didn't really start at that moment. It started beforehand. We're talking about prehistory that sort of erupted at that time. But the idea that it's not something just happened and went away. The struggle still seems to be ongoing even today. But there are more people speaking up from our community that we took advantage of the education. And I think we're passing that message on along. You can't go to sleep. The forces that are still trying to suppress people are still here, and we still have to continue to fight on. How does our viewers get a hold of you if they want to learn more about your books, about your upcoming presentations? I know you're on TED Talks. I pick up your writings in different Huffington Post, LA Times and others. So how do people get a hold of you and get in contact with you?
Well, it's pretty easy. At Cal Poly Pomona, I'm a faculty at the Urban and Regional Planning. So if you go to their website, or if you go to Ethnic Women Studies, my Cal Poly Pomona email is amhuerta@cpp.edu. But it's very easy to contact me. I think I have like 2 traffic tickets, so they're looking for me right now. So I'm sure if the government can look for me and find me, other people can as well.
I keep telling you, man, you got to drive slower than 120 miles an hour, man. You just can't go around doing that.
I think it's the anti-Trump bumper sticker that keeps I keep getting pulled over in Orange County when I drive through the.
I'm not touching that. I'm not touching that with you. We're getting close to end today's interview, but I'd like to leave you the opportunity to speak about your perspective on this anniversary of the 50 years of Chicana and Chicano studies.
Yes, I think this is like in my book that's coming out on June 15th, 1999, 2 for 40. It's a special going on. Is there's a main theme that highlights anti-Mexicanism. And Juan Gomez Quinones, Dr. Juan Gomez Quinones, recently retired from UCLA, brilliant historian, has an article in my book about anti-Mexicanism in the United States. So really what this is what the Chicano movement for the last 15 years is a response to anti-Mexicanism. Since 1848, and when half of Mexico was stolen, and before that when Texas was stolen, from Mexico in 1836. So part of it is documenting the history of anti-Mexicanism to the present, but also highlighting, and this is something I do as well, is the struggles of activists, in particular, working class people, some academics, there's not that many of us, but the few that are out there that are still active, engaged in the community. But I also focusing on the organizing that has been taking place for the last 50 years and beyond, in response to this anti-Mexicanism, to demand that we are here. We're not here to beg. We're not here to ask for crumbs. Our people have fought in wars, have died in wars to defend this country. And from World War I to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, to the present. And what do we get in return? Being scapegoated, being blamed for the country's woes, constantly being put down, being treated as second-class citizens. So for us, for me, it's like enough is enough. So what I try to teach people is stand up, have your chin up high, don't beg. If you get accepted to a university or if you get a job, don't feel like anybody's doing you any favors. If you got it, it's because you earned it. And don't be apologetic. Be proud of who you are. Always look forward. Don't just think about the past, but also think about the future in terms of keeping up with technology and the advances happening. And so we're not left behind in terms of how fast this country is going and the world is going in terms of technology. So I feel that Chicanos and Chicanas have to go more into STEM, for example, to ride that wave so we're not constantly relegated to service work, and which there's nothing wrong with it. My mother was a domestic worker, and there's nothing wrong with service work. But we want opportunities, and we don't want to be limited. And we don't want to be the first anymore. I don't want to be the first Chicano that graduated from Berkeley, city and regional planning. It doesn't feel good. Some people feel that when they reach those milestones that they're special because they're there, and others, I don't feel that way. I'm only going to feel happy and special when all our people have equal opportunity to do that. We just had a recent world champion, Reese, the first heavyweight champion in the world. He just fought and beat a Briton. So it's amazing to me that we're in 2019 and we still have the first Mexican American heavyweight, the first in all these different. And the constant point is that we have to stop settling for the first, and we have to go beyond that, and then we have to speak without apologies and without compromise, and look out for our own communities, especially if we have some privilege, because nobody else will.
I like the idea about what you're saying about being the first, but hopefully being the first, but not the last.
Right.
That's the point I see. It has to continue. Okay, somebody opened the door, yes. Okay, but where's the rest of the people coming through?
Right.
And those that do come behind the others, the struggles of the people in 1969 is what I'm learning from you, is that those that they fought, some gave their lives. Ruben Salazar, upon one of many. They opened the doors for us not to lay back and say, oh, it's a history lesson. But it's a living experience, a call for action for us to be participants as well in the 50 years activities and keep the momentum going so that rights are not taken back on individuals that, we've earned them since back in the 1900s. It's
Right.
not something that just happened last year or something.
Right.
So I want to thank you very much. So again, I want to ask you as we're closing the show, two things. Again, the name of your book that's coming out summer 2019, and contact information again, please.
Yes, the name of the book is Defending Latino Immigrant Communities, the Xenophobic Era of Trump and Beyond. It's 1989. and you can get it on Amazon or the publisher. And also the email is am.huerta@cpp.edu. But like I said, it's easy to find me. You can just just Google me. You'll find me there. And I'm very happy for this opportunity and to keep the struggle alive and to keep hope alive.
Well, thank you very much. And like you say, and as the message I'm taking away from those of us that have the privilege of having had the opportunity to go to school, we do have a responsibility to speak for those that don't have a voice to speak. And that's something that's hard to do, hard to envision, but a responsibility nevertheless, and a very honorable one. And hopefully there will be more doing that. So,
definitely.
Gracias for being on the program, Dr. Huerta, and I wish you continued success on your books, on your writings, and on your protestas, and on keeping the dream alive to help those that need help who do not have a voice.
Okay, muchas gracias, Armando.
Muchas gracias a ti. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Armando F. Sanchez. You can contact me at afsanchez66@gmail.com. Thank you for being on the program. And this is part of a series of celebrating the 50 years Chicano Studies. If you have anyone that you feel should be highlighted, or you have a story that I should follow up on, please don't hesitate to let me know. Again, thank you, Dr. Huerta. Success to you over at Cal Poly Pomona. And I look forward to having you on another show to talk specifically about your book. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Okay, gracias.
Adios.
Yeah, bye.